Wow. Well, if there is further restriction brought before the House of Commons, if we see next week a return of Parliament, if this time next week you're recalled to those green benches, what's going to be the response? We saw around 100 MPs from your side on vaccine
that will all, Tom, that will all depend on the science and the data we're presented with. All the indications are that Omicron, as we predicted, is mild. It's not leading to an increase in hospitalisations and hopefully not deaths. If that persists, we won't get recalled. And if they try and ram through further restrictions against the science and against the evidence we're seeing of the pandemic in this country, there'll be a massive rebellion. And that, I think, would be a watershed point for the leadership of our party.
I have to say, I sense a real sense of anger amongst Conservative MPs on this issue. I was one of the people that was sort of scoffing away the idea of letters going into Graham Brady, the chair of the 1922 committee, several weeks ago. But now that doesn't seem like such a far-fetched prospect.
I think a lot of colleagues have come to the conclusion that we want to be, and we want our constituents to live in a country where freedom is the last thing to be sacrificed, not seen as something you could just throw away willy-nilly. The evidence doesn't support these restrictions we've got currently, let alone any further restrictions. We can't keep doing this to the country. The next variant to knock off Omicron, which is highly contagious, will have to be even more contagious and probably, almost certainly, even milder as this virus evolves down to a coronavirus which will be like the common cold. It'll be endemic. We'll get a sniffle every year. And the sooner we get to that position, the better. We can't go through every time we have a more virulent, a more transmissible but less virulent variant, we lock down the country.
I think for a lot of people, this moment now, we're getting to almost 2 years into this, and a lot of people who potentially have been on the more in favour of restriction side of things have thought that actually enough's enough. Now we have got to the point where we do genuinely have to live with this. Not just say we're going to live with it, but actually live with it.
We do have to live with it. I think people are tired. They need that leadership. And ultimately, you know, you can't live in a country where no one can die of COVID, but no one's actually allowed to live. We're talking about 16 people have officially died with Omicron. We know from the South African figures that 75% of the people they picked up with Omicron actually presented at hospital for other reasons. They'd had car accidents, they'd had heart attacks, sadly, they'd had strokes. It's at least 50% of those people are being picked up in hospital in the UK. Those are the figures. And dying with Omicron or with COVID, those are not really accurate figures.
The with and of distinction is a very interesting one. Unfortunately, it generally takes around 3 weeks to learn the primary cause of death because it takes that length of time for the death certificate.
We've never seen that.
That data is public. The ONS does put it out, but it doesn't go out on the dashboard of the government. It's sort of buried away and it takes a lot longer to compile.
I'm really worried that when we look back on how we've dealt with this pandemic, the lockdowns, when we actually evaluate the real damage we've done to general well-being, health services and mental health, particularly of our young people, I think that lockdown policy will be severely undermined, and I really hope we don't ever use it again.